welcome to the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. I'm your host, Sue Curver, and today I'm sitting down with goat farmer and police officer, Tammy Schafran. As an entrepreneur who's finding comfort and peace through nature, Tammy's on a mission to reconnect with simpler living and help others do the same. Tammy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by talking about your origin story and how you decided to become a police officer. Why did you get into that line of work?
I grew up in upstate New York with my family. It was a pretty typical upbringing, I would say, but my dad was a full-time firefighter. So I saw that side of public service day in and day out. And I think it was just ingrained in me to want to help people, to want to be there for people, to want to be there in their time of need. Because I saw that from my dad when he was at work, but also when he was not at work. So in his personal life as well. He was always finding a way to help people, and he still does to this day. So that was definitely how I decided that I wanted to give back to people and to be there for them. And I got a small taste of that growing up. And then I went to college and was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And that just felt like the most right thing at the time. So I went to college for criminal justice and then started applying for jobs after college. And I got hired on out in Western New York. And I've been full-time law enforcement ever since.
So, why criminal justice? Of all of the degrees that you could have gone for, was there something else that influenced that decision for you?
I've always been a very curious person. And when I do something, I always want to do it perfectly. I knew I wanted to get into law enforcement. So I said, I'm going to go take criminal justice because I want to try and understand the ins and outs of the criminal justice system and anything that is relating to law enforcement. So that definitely steered that decision. And then while I was there, I also decided to double major in psychology. And then I also, while I was going through psychology classes, decided to minor in sociology as well, just because it all goes so hand in hand, how people think, how their brains work, but then also how people work as a society as a whole, what influences culture and all of that as well. And then that all plays a role in law enforcement.
So, law enforcement and police officer is a pretty broad term. Over the course of your law enforcement career, what specifically have you done?
I have been in the patrol division in both departments that I've worked for. That's where you're boots on the ground, patrolling around town, you're responding to calls, you're being proactive, you're finding things that are going wrong or trying to prevent things. So that has been what I have done since I started. Just recently, I've started taking a lot of trainings geared towards investigations. So my goal is to promote into the detective division. Through the last so many years of doing police work, even in the patrol division, when you're responding to calls, you're essentially the first investigator on scene. You're trying to gather everything that the investigators are going to need past what you can do on a call. And that has just intrigued me. And I always want to know the ins and outs of everything. That just seems where I want to go in the future. I want to really dig into everything.
I know in my own personal experience as a law enforcement officer underway in the Coast Guard, it was a very male dominated field. So I'm curious, in your experience, has gender played a role? And if so, how has it been for you as a female officer on the force?
So I have to say that law enforcement in general has come a really long way from where it used to be. There have been so many women that have come before me and have really paved the way for me to easily be able to get into this field and to be respected by my coworkers. I've been very fortunate where I've worked for two amazing departments where I have felt completely respected by my coworkers. I have felt that they respect my work ethic. They really respect my opinion. And I don't feel like it has hindered my forward progress at all. It is hard because I feel like there is an outside societal pressure from not anyone specific. And I could put this on myself as well, but I feel extra pressure to perform perfectly. If I do mess up, I feel like people would just say, oh, she messed up because she's a female, and not that I messed up because I'm a human being and human beings make mistakes. So I have always put extra pressure on myself to prove to society that we as women, we can do this job. We can do this job just as well as our male counterparts, and sometimes we can do it better than them. I'm hoping that as a society as a whole, we're moving in the right direction and in accepting that. I think that's really what I face more than anything within the departments.
So, what an interesting dichotomy, because you have this area where you're a pillar of strength and where you are showing that women can be strong and women can do this. And you've also said in another capacity that you've honed in on your inner strength and your empathy, and that those two things have been pivotal not only in your career, but in your everyday life. How do you balance those two things, the empathy and being that pillar of strength? And how are they important?
I think that in order to be in a public facing role in general, and then to be in law enforcement where you're dealing with people who more often than not are having probably one of the worst days of their lives or a really bad day, it's super important to have empathy for them, because not everybody that you deal with are bad people. They're just in a bad circumstance. And you need to be able to understand that. You need to be able to understand them. You need to be able to have empathy for their feelings and what they're going through. You also have to have that inner strength where you can still do the job that you need to do, but do it with respect.
And I would imagine that that's got to be tough, especially when you're dealing with victims, right? So you're dealing with victims, you're dealing with this legal system that's absolutely overwhelming. You mentioned that you deal with the court of public opinion, which has got to be super tough. Social media, everybody has an opinion. How do you navigate through all of this? And more importantly, how do you create those boundaries to keep from overwhelm or taking these things on yourself?
That's really hard. I have to be so super mindful of what I expose myself to in terms of social media, because that can really start getting you down when you're constantly reading negative opinions, negative comments over and over and over again. And sometimes worse than negative, like violent, hateful opinions. And you know yourself, you know that you're not that person, and you know everybody that you work with are not those people either. So it's really, really hard to avoid that, but I have to be very mindful of that. And then my boundaries that I have learned is that when I'm at work, but when I'm not at work, I have to set up those walls, those boundaries. And it's hard to not think about work. It's hard to not bring work home. It is part of me. And it is so emotional. So I bring a lot of that with me, but I do my absolute best when I'm at home. I'm at home. I'm not at work. I focus on the farm, our animals, and then just getting back to who I am as a person, not as a cop. Nature does that for me. It's very grounding for me. It clears my head and it quiets all the voices that are just constantly in my head, the thoughts that are in my head. And that's really what brings me back to real reality, my personal reality.
I'm so glad that you brought up the farm, because I want to talk about this incredible journey. At some point, you moved to Maine and you started Maple Pond Farm. So I want to know, why farming? And Tammy, more importantly, why goats?
So when I was growing up as a kid, my dad was constantly bringing different animals home. We had ducks, we had chickens, we obviously had dogs. I think that started my love for animals and my like just truly deep connection that I have with animals. And so as I got older and moved into my adult life, I always had this dream of having a farm, but it never really seemed attainable to me. And so I had gotten to a point in my life where I went through several things. I was living in Buffalo at that point and I was going through a divorce. I had lost my nephew to cancer. I had lost a baby. And it felt like at that point, my whole world had come crashing down around me. I remember I was just sitting in my living room one night, questioning everything about my life at that point. I was like, where am I? Who am I with? What am I doing? What do I really want? And I didn't have answers for any of those questions either. I didn't really have good answers. And so I really just started trying to do some inner work with myself and figure out who I actually really was. And I thought I knew who I was, but in those moments, I realized that I had no idea. I was just going through life and checking off the boxes. Through some of that work, I realized I was not in the right place. I was not with the right people. I was not doing the right things. And so I decided to up and move to Maine. There were a couple people there that I knew, and one of them said, "Hey, why don't you come visit?" And so I went and I visited for, I think it was a long weekend, and I just absolutely fell in love with the landscape. You have the ocean right next to you, and then you can drive an hour west or north or south, and then you're in the mountains. I have always loved the mountains. The mountains have spoke so deeply to me anytime I've ever been in them. And then to also just sit by the ocean and breathe in the salt air and just listen to the quiet and the waves. It does something to your soul. And I was hooked. And so I knew at that point I was moving to Maine. So I did. I up and moved to Maine. And then I met my husband, and life just kind of started snowballing at that point. And I was really doing a lot of work with myself, a lot of meditation, a lot of therapy. And I decided that I was going to actually make my dreams that I didn't think were attainable, I was going to make them happen. With the help of my husband, we really sat down and said, okay, can we do this? Do we want to do this? Yes, of course we want to do this. So we started looking around and we found our farm that we ended up buying for sale. And we actually got in on the very last day to take a peek at it hours before they were closing, accepting any offers. And I absolutely fell in love with this place. I just felt an immediate connection. As soon as we drove up the driveway, we bought the farm, and we've been adding animals ever since. I like to call it a zoo now instead of a farm. We seem to just rescue animals, and then of course we have been breeding goats as well, and I'm just absolutely in love with them. I'm in love with how sweet they are, how silly they are, how playful they are, how loving they are. There's something about them that when I go down and I sit in the pasture or I sit in the barn and I just sit quietly with them, and they all just come over and they want to be loved on, and they just stand there quietly and they love me back in a way that I can't even explain, like deep to my soul. It just quiets everything in my head and everything that is going on for that day.
How
Yeah.
long was your sabbatical or the time that you worked on yourself between the time that you left Buffalo and the time that you went to Maine?
I was really working on myself while I was in Buffalo, and then it was April of 2019 that I moved to Maine. And I did get hired here right away, full time as a police officer. And just through that whole time, I was still continuously working on myself. I knew if I was going to be moving forward successfully in any aspect of my life, that I needed to figure out who I was. I believe it was really in the thick of COVID. And it was after we had bought this farm that I did look at Mark and I said, I think I need to take a break from full time police work because I was really struggling at that point, just trying to figure out who I was, what I really wanted. I was struggling with some PTSD issues, several traumatic events that I had dealt with. And so he said, okay, let's make it work. So I took almost 2 years off. I still worked part time as a police officer when they needed coverage for shifts. And then I was working at a veterinary clinic part time as well. And then just working on the farm the rest of the time. Those 2 years really allowed me the space that I needed from police work and also just from the darker side of life and people in general. It really gave me the space to really, really genuinely ground myself and figure out who I was and just heal. I had spent years saying that I was okay and spent years thinking I was okay and thinking that I had healed, but I was really just masking so many things and hiding so many things because I just didn't want to face them and I didn't want to face my own feelings. Those 2 years, they were hard for me emotionally, but they were definitely needed. And in the end, it ended up being okay. I came out stronger for it. Towards the end of that, I said, okay. I'm in a really good place now. And I realized that I still missed police work. I still missed working with people and working with victims and helping people when they really needed it. And I was finally at a place where I'd helped myself enough that I could go back to helping other people as well.
I've talked to a lot of veterans, first responders on the podcast, and we've had extensive conversations about PTSD and then post traumatic growth, where you really can start to thrive through the trauma and live into purpose. And a lot of that has to do with, first of all, giving yourself permission to heal. And then, second of
Mhm.
all, taking on self care practices that you implement in a routine way. I've heard you talk about your goats and
Mhm.
being in nature. I've heard you talk about the ocean and meditation. What are some routine self care practices that you have that allow you to continue to thrive?
I would say that I have several actually. And a big thing for me that probably a lot of people wouldn't even consider this self care is when I wake up, whatever time it is that I wake up, because I work crazy shifts and random hours. But when I wake up, I need an hour with myself and a cup of coffee and quiet time to just wake up, not have anybody else talking to me, not have any noise, and then I can go down and love on the animals. That's one of the biggest things that I need. And I always laugh because my husband is a talker and he works in an office with two people. When I wake up, he's usually coming home from work. And so he hasn't really talked to anybody all day and he is just itching to talk. I'm like, I just need an hour, me and my coffee, and then we can talk all about your day. After that, I make a point to work out 4 days a week, whether it's lifting weights or running on the treadmill. It's good physically, but it is such a stress relief for me. And it's a time where I can really work through things in my head. I take the dogs for a walk. We've got two dogs and we have trails throughout the farm. So I take them through the woods. Mark calls it my forest bathing. It is. And I just love walking through the woods and just breathing deeply. And then the dogs are enjoying it. So that's super huge for me as well. I am not as good about meditating as often as I should, but I do absolutely love meditating. And I love meditating in the sauna during the cold months. It's so freeing to try and quiet my mind and just to get myself back right.
And you've also said that sustainability is an important part of your life. What practices do you employ to ensure that you're living in harmony with nature? And why is sustainability and those associated practices so integral to this life that you now have?
Sustainability is super important because without it, eventually I have a feeling that we wouldn't even have this nature that I love so much to just ground myself in and enjoy. We're trying to be self-sustainable as we can. So we're trying to grow our own food, can our own food for the winter through the winters. And then with the animals, I try to keep them living as naturally as possible in terms of how they would be naturally living in the wild as well. I try to keep their care as natural as possible, and I really try to work towards preventing any issues that might come up with animals rather than reacting. I use a lot of holistic methods when I can with the animals. And then also, I guess you could say that with nature as well. I don't use pesticides. I'm not using chemicals. And that's also kind of what has stemmed our farm business as well. I don't like using chemicals. I've never liked using chemicals, and I've always wanted to move towards a more natural, organic lifestyle. But it's also really expensive to do that. If I can do that myself for us with the food, and then also using the goat milk to make the soaps and the lotions and just body care and self care, that's really my main goal, is to not save the world, but save this small part of the world that I actually can try and save and just help it flourish.
Speaking of soap making, it's fall and you
Mhm.
definitely are in full on soap making, maple syrup making mode. How do you balance working full time in your law enforcement career with running the farm and monetizing your business?
I don't think I have that figured out yet. There are many days where I question my sanity, and there are many days that I have not gotten enough sleep. But all of those things are so important to me to help us get better and to try and help our community get better too. I just keep pushing through and I find a way to make everything happen. Mark and I try really hard. We're at a point in our lives where we really have to schedule our calendars with each other. So we try really hard to schedule time with each other so that that part doesn't fall by the wayside. And then everything else, we just do as much as we possibly can to keep up with it, but also not to lose ourselves in all of that as well. Because when we first started the farm, we wanted to do everything and we were doing everything. And we realized that that wasn't sustainable either. So we have gotten to a point where we have picked the different things that we absolutely love doing. And we do those. And if we have time to do anything extra, we will. But we just do our best. We do our best at everything that we're working on and doing. And that's all that we can do.
Tammy, what's the one thing about entrepreneurship that gets you the most excited?
I get excited when other people get excited. So this is the first year that I've started doing local farmers markets with our products. It has certainly been a huge learning year for me. It's towards the end of the year now, so I have a lot of markets under my belt and I've started to get our farm out there and our products out there. And I get so excited when I have a customer come back and buy more product and say how much they absolutely love it, that it has helped them with certain things. And I also get excited when people come up to me and are excited to just talk about the farm and talk about the goats and talk about why we're doing what we're doing. At the a market that I just did recently, I had a girl come up and was just talking to me about how she was about to buy her first farm and she wanted to get into goats and she was so excited and she had so many questions. I remember when I was there and I remember how excited I was then. I absolutely love that for other people. And if I can mentor other people to get where they want to be as well, it makes me happy. It makes me so excited.
I think lessons learned are so important. And I love this idea of mentorship and helping bring people alongside. So, in that vein, what's been the one thing that's been the most frustrating about entrepreneurship?
It can feel lonely starting a small business in a small town. Starting a small business in the farming community can be tough because you have a lot of people who are already established, and some people don't want to mentor you. They don't want to share their secrets with you, but you really just have to keep trying and keep pushing forward. And eventually you will find those people who genuinely want to help you. And I've found a couple mentors along the way just to help me with the goats. A lot of people think goats are really easy to keep. They're not necessarily easy to keep, and there's so much to learn just with goats in general. And then add starting a small business on top of that. And I have zero training, zero schooling in business. So it has been learn as I go, do as much research as I can. It's hard. It can be lonely, but it's definitely doable, especially if you have a passion for it.
And it sounds like you're obviously very successful. Looking back, what do you wish that you had known at the beginning? Is there anything that you had to find out the hard way?
There are going to be some really hard days where you're just completely questioning why you're doing this and you're wondering if you should just give up. There's a saying in farming that where there's livestock, there's dead stock. And it's hard to not get attached to your animals. A lot of farmers don't view their animals as pets. They're just viewed as livestock. But I have a connection to my animals, a deep emotional connection to them. So they are my pets. They're not my livestock. So it's really, really hard when things go wrong. It's either out of your control or it's something that you just genuinely didn't know and you learn a really hard lesson. Those are just really, really hard days. And you just have to keep remembering why you're doing what you're doing and remember that there's so many more good days than bad days.
How do you navigate that?
It's hard because I have a very empathetic heart and I get very, very attached to animals and people and things. So every little thing genuinely breaks my heart. I have said that my heart is shattered into pieces more often than not, but I also remember that I get so much joy and so much love out of having these animals and the farm and doing what I do that it makes it worth it. It makes the heartache that I feel on those horrible days, it makes it worth it.
So we talked a little bit about entrepreneurship and lessons that you've learned along the way, the positive things, the harder things. And I love that you talked about going through this personal journey before you even launched your entrepreneurial endeavors so that you really had a focused idea of who you were and that you felt very healed. What's the most profound thing that you've learned about yourself along this entrepreneurial journey? Have you had any really big aha moments?
I think the biggest thing is that I'm stronger than I really think I am. I have never grown up being a super confident person. I've always questioned myself and my worth. I think just going through this journey and just getting through surviving so many of the things that I've gone through and also to be thriving at this point too has just taught me that I'm so much stronger than I think I am. And I really need to be more confident with myself.
When you look back on all of this, Tammy, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm just most proud of where I am at in my own personal growth. I feel like I've gone from a not so confident person, constantly questioning myself, into this strong, independent, capable woman who I know I can do all of this and I am doing it and I have been doing it. And I have survived every bad day that I've had and I've survived every episode or every situation that I thought was impossible or scared the heck out of me that I didn't think I would survive. And I have, and I'm doing so well. I want other people to know that they too have an inner strength. They may not have found it yet, but it is there. And if they can just explore themselves and start listening to those inner voices inside of them, that they too can get there too.
That is really, really a powerful message because I truly believe that we are fully equipped to handle the things that lie in front of us. And even if we don't have the specific knowledge or the specific skills or the specific training, we have the wherewithal to figure it out and to find those resources and things that we need. So, thank you for sharing that message. I think more of us need to not only hear that, but live into that and to believe that. So, as a strong, independent, and capable woman, what's next for you? Do you have any big, audacious goals that you're driving towards besides becoming a detective?
Yeah, definitely detective. And then personal life and the farm, I really just would love to expand further into the community. We're still in the growing stages. We're still in the first 5 years of a growing small business. And I just want to get our business out into our local community more. I want people to know who we are and what we stand for. And I want our business to be able to get more involved with the community as a whole. I want people to know that they can come to us when they need anything. We're looking forward to breeding some more goats. That's on the horizon. So I always get very excited for that because then that means little baby goats.
And when you consider all that you have already achieved and all of these things that you want to achieve and you're still driving towards, what impact do you want to have? What is your legacy that you want to leave?
I think I just want other people to know that they too can get back to a simpler life. We can still live this modern life, but we can live that modern life in a simpler way. It's okay for us to slow down. It's okay for us to go back to simpler products. It's okay for us to go back to a more sustainable life and practices in our own small personal lives here. I just want people to realize that it's achievable and they can do it and it can make them happy.
Tammy, how do we do that? Because I think most of us live in a very frantic, fast paced life where simplification and connecting more with nature seems literally unachievable. What words of wisdom would you offer for those who maybe are looking to go in the direction of simplification and sustainability?
That seems to be a hot topic word lately. And when you think about it, sometimes it can seem overwhelming and daunting. I think it comes down to having the mindset that you're not trying to save the whole planet, you're not trying to save the whole world, you're not trying to save everybody. But if you can make small changes for your personal life in your small little world, then that is going to slowly have an impact on the world as a whole. If you can make small little changes each day or make one small change once a month, maybe that's more doable. And then once you have that down into your normal routine, then add another small change. Maybe it's starting to recycle, getting back to simpler and quieter life. Maybe it's taking your cell phones and putting your phones away for the evening so that you actually can sit and have those conversations with the people in your lives and you're not on your phones the whole time. Maybe it's just going outside and going for a 10-minute walk or just going outside and sitting outside for 10 minutes and just taking some deep breaths and breathing in that fresh air, making those small little changes and then adding additional small changes on top of that will make it seem less daunting and a little easier and hopefully more enjoyable.
That's really good stuff. I love all of those options, things to think about for sure. Well, one last question, Tammy. Is there anything that we did not cover that you wanted to talk about?
I think I just want women as a whole to know that it's okay to trust your instincts. It's okay to trust that inner voice that you have. It's okay to trust what your heart is telling you in terms of your personal life and then also in the outside world. So if your instincts are telling you that something's not right, it's probably not right, and you should explore that. If there's a little voice in your heart, in your head that's saying, but I really love this thing and I'm not doing it, I'm doing this thing. It's okay to change. It's okay to say, I'm not in the right place. And it doesn't matter what age you are or where you're at in life. It's okay to up and change what you want to do or what you're passionate for. It's never too late. And you always want to live true to you and live what your purpose is. That can also change as your life changes too. And as you get older and as you learn new things and realize new things about yourself, it's never too late to make those changes and to listen to those voices.
Well, thank you, Tammy, for sharing the simple ways that we can all get back to our roots. You definitely are such an inspiration, learning as you go and living in harmony with nature. Listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Tammy, about her goats, or about Maple Pond Farm, I've included a link in the show notes so you can check that out. And thank you, as always, for tuning in and for sharing the Two Gals and a Mic podcast. Be sure to join me again next week for another amazing woman who's doing extraordinary things. I'll see you then.